Hey everyone, Maury Dunbar here back at Painted Studio. As you can see, I'm in a different place than I'm normally at in the studio when I'm doing a live, but that's because I'm next to my furniture turntable here and we're going to be sealing up my little table. Now, I hope you all had a great holiday season. We are back in full swing and working like crazy right now. So, first thing I had to do is I had some repairs to do on my drawer. It's well made and it's dovetailed on both ends. However, it has been cracked and let loose and things were not really in good shape. There was some chipping on the drawers and the bottom of the drawer wasn't stable in here even after I fixed the side. So I used my favorite, where is it? Oh, I put it away. Oh, let's see if I can reach over here and not fall off my stool. I used Gorilla wood glue, which is my favorite wood glue personally. I've used lots and lots of wood glues. There generally isn't one that's really awful, but I really like Gorilla because it grabs on hard and it does paint well. And then the next thing I did is I sealed in here. I used a brush, got into the edges, made sure they were sealed. I came in, I put glue on all the dovetailed joints because it was really loose. And then I used a couple bungee cords to grab onto my piece. The reason I use bungee cords, not clamps or anything else, is that I can wrap bungee cords around a piece of furniture and it won't dent. Even if I pad a clamp sometimes to get it tight enough to hold together well, I get dents in the wood and I don't like that. And it's probably me because I can be really aggressive with a tool, but if you find that's a thing, go get yourself a bunch of bungee cords at Home Depot. They just save my life all the time. So let me flip this over here like this. All right, here is my table, and as you can see, it's on my little furniture turntable here. And if you're going to ask where I got the turntable, I actually built it myself. I found this is an old IKEA coffee table that they still sell, but I found it on the side of the road, took it apart, put a Lazy Susan piece under the top here, and then rebuilt the whole thing so that I can put furniture on here. And this can hold up to, I think the weight limit on it is 400 pounds. I will tell you though, I wish it had a wider turning base instead of a small one in the center, and if I ever find it, I'll replace it. But it's because that makes it wobbly a little bit, so if it gets heavy on one side, it's a little harder to turn it. But this works, and I've had it for years, and it works well. Okay, so I've stripped my table, sanded the daylights out of it. Now, I sand everything, if I can, in the wintertime by hand, as opposed to using an electric sander. And the reason for that is I am in a smaller space and I just cleaned up in here and I hate sawdust being everywhere. So I used sanding blocks and hand sanders and went at it that way. And it was a lot easier for me to clean up. Now we're gonna shellac this sealed, partially because I'm not sure what's under here, but there's also like some of this red paint that was on it kind of got really embedded in the grain. And since I have no intention, hey Maddie, nice to see you here. Since I have no intention of doing anything other than painting this, I didn't need to strip it down and make it perfect grain. Now this, if you all know me, I make my own shellac, which is very easy. You buy the shellac flakes and then you dissolve them in denatured alcohol. And if you want, I will put a chart up that tells you how to get the cut that you want for your shellac. And the cut means how much shellac to how much denatured alcohol. Here's a jar of lemon shellac. So shellac comes in lots of colors. This is platinum blonde, and I actually need to add a little denatured alcohol to it because this is my most used color and it gets thick. Lemon is much darker. You'd be surprised. You wouldn't think lemon would be so dark, but it is. So the first thing I'm going to do, and I have ruby shellac and garnet shellac. I've made them all. They all do good things. Now I'm just putting a little splash in here of my denatured alcohol into this container. If you've worked with shellac enough, you know about how much you need to thin it with. And I'm gonna mix that up because the resin has it got thick. You know, the jar, I've used it a lot, I've opened it, I've closed it, I've used it a ton of times, and now it just needs to be mixed, and I am going to let this dissolve a little bit in here, and then I'm going to mix it again, and then I'm probably going to strain it. So we're not using this one today. Set that aside. We're going to use our lemon. Now, most shellacs are dewaxed. Now, if you don't want to make your own, you can go to any hardware store, get Zinsser's shellac in the can. It is dewaxed, and that's important because you don't want shellac that has wax in it. It will create a resist layer for your paint. Let's see if I can get this one open, because I opened the other one before we went live. I didn't open this one. Fortunately, that one opened much easier than I expected. All right, I'm going to put that up there, and we're going to start brushing this on. Now, I use a 2-pound cut shellac compared to what most people use in the can. In the can from Zinsser, it's 3 pounds, so that means it's a little thicker. I personally like my shellac a little thinner. I find it penetrates and seals better. And as I'm brushing this on, I'm going to show you here. It darkens it a little bit. The lemon darkens it a little bit, but not a ton. It doesn't make it like super dark. It just darkens it just a touch. But even the platinum shellac would have done that. The platinum blonde shellac is the lightest color you can get, which is pretty similar to whatever you get in a can of Zinsser's. It's just very, very pale. It's not deep colored like this. And I love shellac. I love the way it brushes on, especially when it's a little thinner. It just sort of sucks right into the wood. And if this were a nice piece of wood with good grain, it would make that grain pop up. And this shellac is a traditional finish for wood furniture back in the older days before we came up with all these polys and stuff like that. A lot of furniture was finished in shellac, and that's why if you got anything wet on them, it just made everything a mess, because shellac, especially if you got something with alcohol on it, you could easily get water rings, and then you can easily get, excuse me, if you spill alcohol on it, it turns super cloudy. You can just make a mess with it. But it is ideal for sealing wood that's had stuff on it. And this is, like I said, this had red paint on it, and it is kind of really into the grain. I mean, I literally spent the entire afternoon hand sanding this. And part of the other reason that I like to hand sand is it really makes me get my hands, just like doing a lot of things, it makes me get my hands on the piece of furniture, turn it right side up, turn it upside down, really get a feel for what each piece is. And you'd be amazed at the weird things that I find just by doing that. I'm going to turn my table a little, and I may have to adjust the camera because this is not dead center in the table. I know, shocker. Something I'm doing is not dead center. And I was in here with knives and scissors and pickers and all kinds of stuff to get all that paint out of all the crevices, and then hand sanding it. And I don't often share this, but one of my favorite sanding tools when I'm working on something with a lot of weird little tiny crevices like the edges of tables here, I use nail files, you know, the kind you go get at Sally Beauty, because they have 180 grit on one side and 80 grit on the other, and they are great because they're stiff and they get into those these edges and stuff in here without folding back on you. and I really, really find that useful. Hey there! Nice to see you in. Thank you for coming by. We've got visitors who I have personally met. And Maddie, your wreath was on my front door for Christmas this year. It's place of honor. And when the tree fell down on the front of my house, it didn't even knock anything off the wreath, which was impressive to me. The tree didn't break anything, including the wreath. Now this is the back part, so there might be a little more paint showing on here than other places. Now, normally you might be able to paint something you've shellacked in a couple hours. However, because there's so much alcohol in this, I personally like to wait a day or so just to make sure. I'll wait at least overnight so that all that alcohol has evaporated out of here and made this a full and stable finish. Now the cool thing with shellac, and I know a lot of you know this, but not everybody does, is that alcohol is the solvent for shellac. So if you find you have like a big dribble or something, suddenly, you know, like you just slopped it on and all of a sudden you got a big dribble, you can go back in with some denatured alcohol on a pad and wipe at it, and it will soften the shellac up and spread it. So shellac is alcohol based, and alcohol is its solvent, and it is very malleable to being manipulated that way. I believe shellac, my memory's not always right, so don't take this for gospel, but I believe shellac is also what's used in French polishing, which is layers and layers and layers of varnish or shellac that is sanded with steel wool in between each layer until you can get a almost mirror-like shine from it. I've never done it, which is probably why I can't remember for sure that it's shellac, but shellac makes sense in the way it works, that would be the thing. And it's gorgeous, but it is a very challenging, very, very challenging hand finish. So if you don't want to do something like that, I suggest you find somebody else. It's, a lot of these old techniques that some of us were trained on many years ago are not finishes that are done by most people anymore. And French polishing is generally something done by very high-end woodworkers, which I am definitely not. So at this point, I'm just working on making silk purses out of sow's ears sometimes. Yes, my homemade shellac. This is my lemon de-wax shellac. I will post in the thread for this later when I can find it and when, I'm out of the studio, the chart from shellac.net on your proportions to make all kinds of sizes. Basically, when they're saying something is a 3-pound cut, which is standard for shellac, it is 3 pounds of shellac flakes for 1 gallon of denatured alcohol. The better the denatured alcohol, of course, the finer your shellac. I'm using an inexpensive one to thin things, but I made mine with very good, very, very fine denatured alcohol, very refined. Now, some states you cannot get denatured alcohol. And since that's the case, you may have to find somebody to make you shellac and ship it to you. But this is my personal preference. I had started making shellac about 8 years ago when I started struggling with the pre-made just because I didn't like how it flowed, and then I was always adding alcohol to it, and I thought, this is dumb. Let me learn how to make it the way I want it, because it's not hard. You're basically putting flakes in denatured alcohol, shaking it, walking away, coming back, shaking it again, walking away, coming back, shaking it again until everything's completely dissolved, and then you strain it to remove any impurities. And it's very, very simple to make. And you can make as much or as little as you want, so I don't have to have tons and tons of it sitting around pre-made. I can just have what I need. Now let me make sure I've gotten all the spots here, because you know, when I get talking is when I forget to seal things up, because I'm gifted that way. Now we get under here. I'm not really worried that there's going to be any stain coming out of this. Having sanded this down, it's a fairly, I think it was basically just a sealed up light wood because there wasn't a lot of stain under here. It's the red paint that has me the most concerned. And I just don't want that pigment coming through. So now if you look at this, this is what the lemon shellac looks like on the wood. This is what the sanded wood looks like. So even though it's not my pretty finish on here yet, you can see just how the shellac affects the wood. And the blonde shellac, it would have been lighter. All right, so I'm coming under here, and I've got to go under all of this, so I'm going to probably be sticking my head under here and looking at it funny, I know. Did I get this? No, I didn't get this. I only managed to remember to do one side of this. I am a genius. This is what happens when I'm talking and painting at the same time. This is why I'm usually alone in my studio working, so I can keep my mouth shut and concentrate. All right, let me get these edges. And then I'll get the top. Now, later I will assess if it needs another coat. Sometimes you don't know until everything's dry. And it will tell me if it looks like it's soaked too much into the wood, a second coat is often warranted. I'm okay with that. I'd rather do 2 thin coats than one big heavy gloppy coat that I'm going to have to sand down the resin from. And if you're not familiar with what shellac is the secretions of the lac beetle. Yes, it's made from bug poop. Well, I don't think poop is really what it is, it's just the secretions of the lac beetle. However, it is an animal-based product, so if you're a person who doesn't like to use anything that has been made from animal products, and there are, I respect that. It's not something I do, but I understand it. Shellac is not a product for you because there is no way to make shellac. There is no such thing as a true shellac that is not made from the secretions of the lac beetle. Now, it's not like you're gonna get like bugs in your shellac. It's cleaned, it's processed properly, it's managed the way it should be. But it is made from bug secretions. And no, they don't kill the bugs because doesn't make sense. They're using this, it's like silkworms. They use what the creature produces. All right, now to clean up a brush that has been used with shellac. Let me throw it over here. All right. Angle this up so that you're not looking at the top of my head. To clean a brush that has been used with shellac, first thing you do, take paper towel and squeeze all the excess out. If you don't want this on your hands, put on gloves. Then you're going to take a container and you're going to put denatured alcohol in there and you're going to swirl it around. And then you're going to go back and clean it again. Then you're going to go back and forth. Actually, let me grab a container over here and I'll show you what I mean. Okay. I've got little containers sitting over there. They just weren't within direct reach. So now I'm going to take my can of denatured alcohol. And yes, it says fuel because this is the stuff that you use in things like Bunsen burners and stuff like that. And that was, I splashed everywhere. That's all right, it won't hurt anything as long as it doesn't take the finish off my shoes. All right, so I have my paper towel. I take this, I go in here. And you can see it sort of starts to turn it yellowish. Okay, then I come back and I clean the brush. Now, because this is flammable, it's not combustible, but it is flammable. It says fuel right on it. I always leave my paper towels out to dry before I throw it in the garbage. Even though I know it's not combustible, it's a, if you've ever had a fire in your house, you have habits that are thinking to prevent fire. And that's my thought most of the time. So I'm also cleaning off the ferrule so that there's nothing there. And I keep going back in and wiping my brush down and then going back into the alcohol until it comes clean. Once it's clean, then I go clean it with soap and water. Because if I don't clean it with a little soap and water, hey there, Debbie, nice to see you here. If I don't clean my brush with a little soap and water, the last little bit of residue on here could make my brush stiff. Now, if I forget that and it makes my brush stiff, I go in, soak it in a little alcohol, and my brush is loose again, so I'm good. Now, what do I do with the dirty alcohol? I can do two things with it. I can either pour a little of it into my shellac so that I keep it thin, or, which I do most of the time, I leave it out to evaporate. I can't pour this back into my container because it's not clean. It's yellow. It's full of shellac. And I might need this for other things because I use denatured alcohol for multiple things. So I will leave this sitting out, and by tomorrow morning, there'll be nothing in here except a little haze of lemon shellac. It evaporates that fast. Denatured alcohol is something that evaporates super, super fast, even faster than regular rubbing alcohol, because the alcohol content, there's a whole lot of differences between methyl spirits, alcohol, and rubbing alcohol, isopropyl rubbing alcohol, and part of that's the size of the molecule and all that, and that's a science lesson that I'm not prepared for because I don't have my notes. But just trust me when I say that evaporates really fast. I leave all of my paper towels sitting out over the back of a chair so that they evaporate, so that I feel it's safer for disposal. Again, making your own shellac, easy peasy. My recommended supplier, I don't carry shellac flakes, so you're not getting any of this from me. Yes, I can see that. Yes, a lot of people, I will use denatured alcohol as a test to figure out what the finish is. If I get an old piece and I put some denatured alcohol on it and it doesn't soften anything, I know I'm dealing with like hard polyurethane. If it turns yellow, I'm probably dealing with a varnish or a shellac. If it turns cloudy white, I'm dealing with a water-based, possibly a water-based pre-catalyzed lacquer. So there's a lot of ways. I use it for that. I use it for tool cleaning. I use it in cleaning. I actually use it sometimes in drawers if they smell a little funny. If I spray the inside of the drawer down, the alcohol sort of raises the smell out of them. Denatured alcohol is really, really useful for a lot of things. And I often can, if I need to, I can use a little denatured alcohol and clean some paint off of my clothes if I'm careful, because you have to test that. It can also remove the dye. I use it if I've got paint on stuff that it shouldn't be on, because it will, as long as the paint's fairly fresh, it will soften it up right away and you just wipe it off. Denatured alcohol is a very, very, very useful tool. But what I was saying, that I kind of got distracted as usual. Look, bright shiny object, I'm off in another direction. Making your own shellac is easy. You can make as much as you want. You can control the color. Shellac.net is my go-to to get shellac flakes, and they sell a very, very high-end denatured alcohol there. It's extremely pure. So if you really get into doing that and you really want to try going for top-of-the-line everything, shellac.net, and buy their denatured alcohol. If not, go to your hardware store and ask for the finest. They may only have one kind, because sometimes, like, I go to Ace and they only have this. And this will work too. This will absolutely work fine. But I like the higher end for shellac. It just works a little better. If you really want to make shellac, I will absolutely say give it a shot, because you can buy a small bag of flakes and you don't have to make a lot, because even though I'm saying 3-pound cut, 2-pound cut, whatever, the chart that I will share again and post both in this, after this video, and I will post it to my page, shows you not only a full gallon's worth of shellac, but how to make like 8 ounces or 4 ounces. And if you can do basic math, even if the chart stops at 8 ounces, you can do the math to go, oh, well, if I want only 4 ounces, I just cut the 8-ounce measures in half. So it's really user friendly, and it's really kind of satisfying to know that you've got this that you made yourself, and you know exactly how you want it to apply. Like I said, standard shellac, the Zinsser shellac from Home Depot, from any hardware store, that is a 3-pound cut, meaning that when they manufacture it, for every gallon of denatured alcohol, they have 3 pounds of shellac flakes. This is mine. You can see it's waterier or more liquidy. I make a 2-pound cut. That is my personal preference. So that's my goings on about shellac, and we have sealed our little piece. Oh, I have to go back in, and I still have to do the drawer because I forgot about it. We still have the drawer unsealed, so I will go dip back into my shellac. I will seal my drawer, and tomorrow, hopefully, I'll have an idea of what I'm going to do with this. And if you see this and you have any ideas for how I should finish this table up, the only thing it's not going to be is raw wood. So if you have ideas for patterns, colors, designs, foils, throw them my way. I'm interested, because I want to do something with this. I just don't know what I want to do yet. I've already done the hard work. I've gotten everything stripped and cleaned down and sealed up. Now I get to start thinking the fun stuff. All right, everybody, have a good night. Thanks for coming by. Bye-bye.